Hello, welcome to another episode. If you are watching this on YouTube, then you might see me get progressively more sweaty as this goes because there is a heat wave in the UK and I obviously cannot have a window open or the fan on while I record. So just, watch me melt, or if you're listening to this on audio, feel for me, please. Okay, this episode feels a little bit clickbaity, right? With this title and idea of how I wrote 40,000 words in a week, but it is true. It is not recommended. It's not glamorous, but it is possible. And I was reflecting on this of how did I actually manage to write that? Because when I was studying for my degree, I'd have to write 2,000 words for an essay, 3,000 words, sometimes a bit more. But it would take me ages to write them sometimes, of doing all the research and the planning and all of this. And it kind of shocked me that I was able to write 40,000 words in about 7 days. So I then was thinking, are there any lessons here that I could share with you guys of how you could speed up your writing? Because these tips are going to help you write even, just a few thousand word essays. I say that like that's easy. It's not. But making that process faster and also making the process a hell of a lot easier, because I do feel like I've cracked the code now, right? Obviously, I did my degree while working full time, didn't have a lot of time. Then I started trying to also build this business, and I had to write loads and loads of blogs. And so I learned how to write faster and get my ideas down. And then I was approached by a publisher and I had to write my book, The Return to Study Handbook. And I had to write half of that while I was still working full time. And so then I had to write that book. And now I've been teaching students for the last 9 years now how to write essays. I've proofread, I counted it a while ago, over 1 million words of essay writing. So I kind of feel like I know what I'm talking about. And this latest project of mine, where I had to write that many words, really drove it home to me. And so I want to share some of that advice in this episode, because the only reason that I was able to do that was because I have these strong academic writing habits and strategies and skills to fall back on. If you want a little bit more information on just how stressful the process of finishing my most recent qualification was, then you can go listen to episode 171 if you haven't already. But let's get on with what happened, why I had to write that many words, and what I did and lessons that I can share to help you in your writing. Okay, so first I want to make it clear what I was writing, as that made a big difference, I think, on my ability to write that much in so little time. So I was working on the final assessment for my qualification to become a specialist study skills tutor. So it's this teaching practice portfolio. So I had to go and actually teach. So I had to find some students who have learning differences, one with ADHD, one with dyslexia. I had to design an entire program of study skills support and then run those sessions and then fully analyze the whole shebang and submit it in a portfolio. Now, the final word count when I submitted was 53,000 words, which is just mammoth to even contemplate, really. Typically, dissertations at the undergraduate level range from about 8,000 to 15,000 words. Postgraduate, master's type level, they have quite a wide range, could be 10,000, could be 50,000. So this was pretty mega. And I had written about 8,000 words already with my initial report and analysis on one of my two students. And then, everything just went a bit wrong with the course. Again, listen to episode 171 if you want all of the gossip there. And I wasn't able to keep up with any of the write-ups. In an ideal world, and the advice that I would share and give to myself next time, run a session, write it up, maybe that might be helpful, rather than doing all the sessions, which I did, 22 in total, didn't actually, I think I'd written up 1 or 2. Whoops. So I then, by the time I'd finished doing all the sessions, I had about 10 days left, and I started writing furiously. And I worked out then that it was the final 7 days where I wrote about 40,000 words. Now, this was not research heavy writing, so I didn't have to also do these complex literature reviews. I didn't have to obviously complete my own research. I wasn't pulling in all of this information from multiple sources and crafting it into these arguments. Like, I don't think it would have been possible in that time frame to write a super theory laden piece at a high quality. So I was lucky in that respect. However, not to say that this was easy. I wasn't just kind of, I don't know, writing a bit of a diary or a journal. I had to engage in high level critical reflection. So I had to analyze every single session, rewatching, reviewing hours of video footage and transcript, had to analyze these sessions and provide case study write-ups that included enough analysis, enough evaluation to hit all of the learning objectives. Now, the learning objectives went on for pages and pages, and so I had to weave in relevant concepts and principles from the course to show that I'd actually learnt them, analyze and reflect on what happened, why it mattered, what I could have done differently. It was pretty intense, but just not, textbook journal searching type of intense. And the me of early on in my degree journey would never have been able to pull this out of the bag. I was younger then, so maybe I could have coped a bit better with, late nights, pulling all-nighters, but I just didn't have the writing skills early on in my degree to actually have got this done at the speed necessary and obviously at the quality necessary to actually pass. So the only way I could write that much that fast was because I had built this skill set in academic writing. If I'd had to learn how to write critically or how to write reflexively at a deep level while actually writing, if I'd had to figure that out, or if I didn't understand how to take complex, lengthy guidance, turn it into a roadmap, I would have been absolutely screwed. And yeah, even if I had somehow magically gotten it written, I wouldn't have passed because my work wouldn't have been good enough to tick the boxes. So let's talk about kind of what didn't help and what might be slowing you down in your essay process. Now, let's be clear. I did not write 40,000 words in a week because I'm a superhuman typist, and I just guzzled gallons of caffeine. Like, I am fairly quick at typing, and I did drink quite a lot of coffee and Diet Coke, but none of that would have helped if I hadn't already built these skills. So here's a few things that didn't help me, and that probably aren't helping you to write better essays faster either. So typing speed, I guess the idea of writing faster, writing essays faster, you might assume then that means I have to physically type faster. Now, obviously, I can't be typing kind of one letter every second. I can't be doing that. But the bottleneck in essay writing is your thinking speed, not your typing speed. And I guess it's not just even thinking speed because, again, if I was doing kind of just like a diary, like just free writing my thoughts, then yeah, I would probably be thinking them quite fast and then I could type them. But obviously you have to think academically fast and then actually translate that into words on the page. Because if you don't know what you're trying to say, you're going to sit staring at the screen, or you're going to write waffle that needs deleting or tons of editing. So it's not that magically if you become a fast typer, you will automatically write good essays fast. Instead, you need clear planning, an understanding of how to structure paragraphs and arguments, and a pre-writing strategy, which I will talk a little bit about later. Another thing, a kind of mistake, is relying on motivation, and that might be slowing down your essay writing. So, motivation's great when it shows up, but it's also flaky, and it's not actually a vital part of effective studying. You don't have to feel motivated to get lots of work done. It can make it easier, but it's not actually as important as we think. Now, I definitely did not feel motivated to write those 40,000 words. I actually felt pretty awful that week. I went from feeling like, yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to absolutely smash this, to, oh my goodness me, it's not even possible. And I felt very much alone. I felt like anyone I spoke to, if I spoke to my boyfriend or my friends or my family, and I tried to explain to them the stress I was under, it kind of was a bit fruitless because they actually didn't understand the course. So they were just like, Chloe, you can do this. You can do hard things. And I was like, but you don't understand. You don't understand what I have to do. So yeah, I can honestly say not motivated at all. I wanted someone to swoop in and save me or just do the whole thing for me. So what got me through wasn't motivation. It was acceptance of my fate. So choosing this hard over the hard of failing. That's a recent episode as well. And it was also this acceptance of fate backed up by systems, habits, and skills that I could lean on to just help me do the goddamn work. So, another thing that could be slowing down your writing process is figuring it out while writing. So, this is one of the biggest slowdowns I see. And that is students trying to figure out the structure, work out their argument, like remember what the question is asking while they are mid-draft, while they are in the writing process. Now, this kind of multitasking, it puts a huge load on your working memory, and your brain just can't hold that many spinning plates at once. And it makes the whole process slow and overwhelming. When I proofread the essays of students, which I do quite often, I can usually tell when this has happened, when they've kind of not made it up as they go along, but kind of like they think, oh yeah, I've got loads of notes around me. These are relevant things I'm going to talk about. Here's a rough idea, maybe of the main points I want to make. Like that's enough, right? But I am a big advocate of very detailed planning, and it has to be backed up with skills of really being able to decipher the guidance as well. But what I tend to see is paragraphs that start off great and then they go off on tangents, or there are ideas repeated across different sections, which not only wastes time, wastes words, it weakens your argument, and then it lends itself to really overwhelming editing, where like quite often the feedback I give is, oh, this idea, you've mentioned it a few times. You've mentioned it kind of in this paragraph, and then you start talking about it again here, and you start talking about again here. Really, you need to say it once well. Okay. You need to take all of those words that you've spent saying the same thing and say it better and deeper in one place. And that's quite overwhelming to think about. Right. When I give that feedback, sometimes students are like, yeah, but where am I going to say it? Where am I going to reorder it? And that can feel very overwhelming. So if you are someone who feels quite overwhelmed by editing and you end up not doing it or kind of seeing proofreading as just as editing, then actually I would say spend more time working on your planning and work on building skills of planning, because then editing is kind of a lot easier. And that's my take on it, that front load the work, spend more time planning, then writing's pretty quick and editing's pretty quick as well. So we need to plan before we write. We need to know how to break the task down. We need to know how to decode the guidance and build out our arguments before we actually start writing. And then the final thing, which I've kind of touched on, that could be slowing you down in your essay process is overloading your working memory. So all of us have a limit to our working memory capacity. So this is our brain's mental workspace. So it's where you hold information just long enough to do something with it. So that might be, if someone owes me money and they need to transfer money to me, I might tell them my bank account number that they can then put into their banking app, and they have to hold that account number in their brain to then put it into the app. In studying terms, it's where you might read a piece of theory and you're like, oh yeah, I want to bring that into my essay. So you have to hold the idea in your working memory long enough to apply it to the situation of your essay and then write a coherent sentence. It's kind of wild that our brains can even do that. Now, learning differences such as ADHD or dyslexia, they can impact our working memory capacity, but also things like lots of stress, like mental health issues, physical health issues can have an impact on working memory capacity as well. And we're all on a spectrum, right? So even if you don't have those learning differences, or you don't have enough of a learning difference in that area to have a diagnosis, you could still have a lower working memory capacity than someone else. So then we have cognitive load. So this is related to working memory in that it's the amount of stuff that you're asking your brain to hold at once. And we can think of this like a computer. Like even this morning, my computer had a bit of a hissy fit because I was trying to get it to export a video while uploading a big file to the cloud, while also downloading some other files from my browser. And it just was like, absolutely not. I can't do any of this now. And so that's what can happen when we overload our working memory. And if while you're working on your essay, constantly switching between tabs, right? Jumping from here's my guidance doc, and then here's some relevant articles, and here's my notes, and then here's my draft. You're jumping between them, which feels quite common. That's how I used to write essays. Your working memory takes a hit every single time. And if you're also checking your phone every 5 minutes because studying is boring and you're feeling the resistance and it's easier to just pick up your phone and check social media, or if you're trying to write in a noisy space or there's distractions around you, this is putting even more pressure on your cognitive load, meaning you don't have a lot of working memory capacity left. So that small amount that you have left to actually do the doing, that's what's making essay writing harder and take longer. I have another recent-ish episode on that, on how to reduce studying overwhelm, and it's all about cognitive load. So I'll make sure I link these relevant episodes in the description as well. So the answer here then is to try to reduce any external distractions, and then also keep your reference material close to your writing space. So what I mean by that is if you are working on a section and you've got like a bit of guidance that says, okay, here's what you need to include in this section. You've kind of mapped out, you've taken the guidance, taken the learning outcomes, oh yeah, in this section, I need to do these few things. I need to make sure I mention that and bring in that. Rather than keeping that guidance elsewhere or trying to remember it, actually just copy and paste it onto your page. So you've got your guidance at the top of this like section, and then maybe you've got your ideas in bullet points, and then you've got space underneath it to actually start writing it. So all of it is within your eye line, right? You're not having to scroll down pages. You're not having to flip between tabs or documents. It's all there. That can massively reduce the cognitive load that you're putting on your brain, which means you've got more working memory capacity to actually do the thing and write the essay. And then, surprise, surprise, it's easier and faster. So can you see that when we're talking about writing faster, we're not really talking about how fast your fingers move. Okay, we're talking about how well you prepare, how clear your thinking is, and how effectively you manage your brain while you're working. Okay, so I've talked about what not to do. Now I want to talk to you about what did actually help me write 40,000 words in a week. And this is where I'm going to share the tools, the habits, the strategies that help me pull off this kind of incredible feat. And every single one of them you can use to write your own essays faster, stronger, with a lot less stress. So I think I'm going to be sharing 6 key ideas. No, 7. I made that up. Okay, so the first one is I decoded the rules of the game. I talk about this quite a lot in all of my content around strategic studying, but I didn't just read the guidance, I decoded it. I knew that with pages and pages of learning outcomes, it was madness to expect my working memory to be able to hold it all and then be able to write in a way that just magically ticked all those boxes. Like instead, I knew I was going to need some kind of roadmap, some kind of checklist. So that's what I did. I pulled out every single one of these learning outcomes and turned it into a checklist. And if any of them felt a little bit vague, I made sure I understood them. And then I kind of rewrote them so they're a bit clearer. So I was super clear, okay, this is what I need to do. And then I worked out what each section needed to include of my portfolio, because there was lots of different pieces to it. And so I worked that out based on the guidance. I worked out, okay, out of all of these learning outcomes, which ones are relevant to this section. And like I just said about keeping things in eyesight, keeping your reference material close, I pasted this shortened list of must-dos and definitely do nots, like all of the rules that I'd found, into my working document, so they were always right in front of me. For example, I had to demonstrate in my sessions with the students that I was flexible. Okay, so if something happened or the student came and they hadn't been able to progress with something that we talked about, or they weren't in the best headspace, or their energy was low, I had to show that I was flexible and could kind of adjust the session and not just be like, oh, well, no point having a session today. And because I knew that I put on my list, must demonstrate flexibility, I had that front and center. I wasn't trying to remember it. It wasn't just a far off thing in the back of my mind of like, oh yeah, I should probably, try and weave that in somewhere. I had it front and center. So as I was writing that section, I knew mention the word flexible or flexibility. So I didn't keep them in separate docs I'd have to keep switching back to. And now, if you don't understand what the task is actually asking, you're already kind of stuck, and that's going to slow down your writing, but then actually make your writing output not that great. My supervisor for this course actually told me that students do fail the course based on this portfolio, not because they're not great study skills tutors. The students they worked with got great results, but because they don't properly understand the learning objectives, and then they miss all of the, in their write-ups, they just miss talking about things, and then the tutor can't tick the boxes. Because the thing about this qualification is I had to submit 2 videos from my 22 sessions. So outside of those videos, I had to demonstrate all of my skills and knowledge in my write-ups. Otherwise, the markers would have no idea what I was doing in those sessions, whether it was any good or not. So I really had to make my academic writing even better, because I wasn't relying on them watching videos and seeing that I was great. I had to prove that I was great in my write-ups. And this is the same for your essays, right? Your assignments, any of your assessments in your course are designed to test whether or not you have learned the knowledge and skills set out in the learning objectives for your course. So in your assessments is your only opportunity to demonstrate that you have gained that knowledge and skills. And so then if your writing skills aren't up to scratch, it doesn't matter if you know everything, learned everything, could talk about it for hours, you're not going to get the marks, which is annoying. And it doesn't seem fair at times, because there are lots of reasons why students struggle with writing, but that's why I'm so passionate about teaching it. And it's why I am sweating in this room right now to record this podcast, because I know how important learning how to write essays is, and I want to try and share my advice with as many students as possible. Anyway, bit of a tangent there. Essay writing isn't guesswork, it's decoding the guidance and then delivering and demonstrating on that. Okay, the second thing I did was I created templates and structure for my sections. So I kind of mentioned this, but I knew the ingredients of each part before I started writing. So I knew, for example, that in one of my sections, I needed to analyze how each session had aligned with some or all, ideally all, of the 7 core principles from my training. So I made repeatable sentence starters to guide me. So I just had to fill in the blanks and tweak them. So rather than, again, just trying to remember each of the 7 and, oh yeah, I should probably try and weave those in, I had a list front and center at all times. Here's the 7, and then here are some sentence starters. Like, I ensured that I used multisensory approaches, because multisensory was one. Another one was about metacognition. So I can say, like, I supported the students' metacognition by doing X, Y, Z. So I wrote this little list of sentence starters tailored for my course to help me out. And I also made checklists of my tasks to keep me on track, because I need visual ways to track progress and feel like I'm actually getting somewhere. Now, these templates, they weren't rigid, but they were scaffolds to give me direction. And there are always going to be ways that you can apply this type of thinking to your writing as well. And if you haven't already, be sure to grab my free guide. It's a set of 50 sentence starters, which is going to help you to write stronger, clearer essays, but give you a bit of a head start. So you get these sentence starters, you kind of copy and paste, fill in the blanks, tweak them to fit your learning and your course and subject. So I will link that freebie again in the episode description. Okay, the third thing I did was I planned before I wrote. Now, when I wrote my book, The Return to Study Handbook, I didn't just sit down and write. I planned each chapter carefully. And part of that was helped by the fact that no publisher is just going to let me spitball 70,000 words. So there was a super detailed plan written by me. And it wasn't just kind of high level. I mapped out not just each chapter is going to be about this, but each section of that chapter and even each paragraph. I was like, yeah, this paragraph is where I'm going to share advice on how to take notes. And then here are the 7 bullet points I'm going to turn into that paragraph. Like, that's the level of detail I got to, which meant when it came to writing, that actually was the easiest bit, right? The hardest bit was making the plan. The actual writing, super easy, because I literally was just turning bullet points into full sentences and bringing in examples and reflection and ideas. That's why my book is easy to read, because it was well planned. And it's why a well planned essay is a gift to the person marking your essay, because it's clear, it's focused, it flows. It's a lot easier for them to give you marks. Same with my portfolio, right? For this qualification, I had my structure sorted. I mapped out what I wanted to say. Then I filled it in. I didn't have to improvise. I didn't have to type and hope that while typing I was going to magically stumble upon incredible things to say. So fast writing is planned writing. And then the fourth thing I did was I actually did pre-work, right? I did some pre-writing before I started the real thing. Now, there is always an amount of pre-work required for any essay. And this is sometimes something that students don't like to hear. They kind of like to think, well, okay, I've got to write a 3,000 word essay. So yes, I've got my notes and I've got a bit of a plan. So I just need to sit here and write. And once I get to about 3,000 words, I'm done, right? Or, okay, maybe I need to write 3,500 and then I can cut them to get down to 3,000. But actually, there's always pre-work involved of some description. So it could mean that you have to do a full compare and contrast of 2 different theories in your notes before picking out the key ideas for your argument. It might mean taking multiple case studies and applying theory to them to then work out which one you're going to include in your actual essay. You can't avoid the pre-work, even though it's annoying and it feels like wasted time. And sometimes it's not a thing that we actually factor in. So for each student, for each session, I reviewed my notes. I rewatched the video footage. That took ages. And I reviewed the transcripts of those sessions. And then I wrote brief notes in categories that I had decided those categories based on what I was going to have to write up. So I wrote notes on the tasks that we worked on in those sessions, the specific learning strategies that I used, how the student responded to them and their feedback, which of my theoretical frameworks that I'd learned over the course applied, which of those 7 principles applied and where, what I could have done differently and why, what we were going to do in the next session. And against my notes, I added some timestamps in case I needed to go back and listen again. So only after I had this plan for each session did I then begin drafting. I wasn't writing from scratch. Like, I know that if I didn't take an hour or so per session to make those notes, the write-up would have been awful. It would have taken me so much longer, and the finished product would have been so much worse. I would have likely forgotten to include key parts, or I would have gone off on all these tangents and written loads of words that they needed cutting. Like, pre-writing and planning saves time. And in kind of related to this is number 5, that I wrote messy and I edited later. Now, I didn't stress over repetition or clunky phrases or whether I'd already used the word however like 12 times already. I just kind of got my thoughts down, and I trusted in my skills that I would go back and polish later. Now, part of this as well is I do fully stand behind the idea of writing messy and editing later, but also as you improve your academic writing skills, the messy first draft is actually pretty good, right? I trusted in my skills that I knew how to write well and clear. So my thoughts going down on the screen were kind of mostly clear, mostly coherent. It wasn't that they made no sense. And so this speed that you can get, this writing faster, comes from the permission to write messy, and then the skill to at least get the bare bones down well enough to then tidy up later. So then number 6, the 6th thing I did was I reduced the cognitive load wherever possible. So like I mentioned earlier, cognitive load is the amount of effort that your working memory is under. And there are 2 types to this. So there's the intrinsic load, which is how complex the task actually is. And then there's the extraneous load, which is the stuff that makes studying harder than it needs to be. So that might be things like unclear instructions, distractions, switching between tabs. So I had strategies for both of these. So I tried to simplify the task. So I tried to reduce the intrinsic load. So taking this big, overwhelming task that could take up loads of capacity in your working memory, and I broke it down and made these checklists, these templates, so I could understand exactly what I had to do. And then I worked in a way to reduce the friction externally. So I'm kind of pretty good at this now of knowing what works for me, but I was not, I didn't multitask. I was very good at I am typing up this session right now. I'm not doing anything else. And if I have other thoughts that come to me of I need to remember to do that, I had a specific piece of paper next to me of tasks that I needed to remember or notes for later, rather than stopping and going and doing that thing. But a big thing as well as keeping the reference material close, like I mentioned, was having a second screen or split screening. So, you may just have your laptop and that's it. But I would always recommend kind of splitting your screen so that you've got, notes on one page and your draft on another, kind of sharing the screen. But if at all possible, getting a second monitor. And it's not, I get there's not always possible, space, money. I got a monitor, I think I got one secondhand, my first one, but they're not hugely expensive. And even if you can't buy one right now, could you borrow one, right? I'm sure there's someone who has a spare monitor that you could just borrow for a little bit when you're actually deep in the throes of essay writing, because it makes a huge difference of, rather than having, again, all these layered tabs, layered documents that are taking up space in your working memory to go between them. This means everything's kind of where you need to see it, right? It's so much easier if you've got things on multiple screens that you can see in your eye line. And then the last part is that I knew how to get into the zone, like I kind of mentioned, right? Of no phone, no passive multitasking, no half watching something in the background. If I'd studied in that way, I would still be writing now. I got through 40 goddamn thousand words in a week because I knew how to get into deep focus, even for short bursts. And when that deadline was looming, something just clicked. Yes, it was very stressful and I would not like to do it again, but something clicked, which actually feels really powerful on reflection of like, oh, wow, I can actually do that. But, I have a habit, if my phone is near me when I'm working, that I just reach for it. But there was a point where I think my body, my mind, my soul just aligned. And I stopped reaching for my phone as if it was trying to tell me, like, Chloe, seriously, don't even think about reaching for that phone. Like, you've got zero time to waste. I've trained myself to focus when it counts, and you can too. It means building habits to reduce distractions, get and stay focused. And it doesn't mean that you have to be like a machine or like a robot, but wouldn't it be nice to feel like when you want to turn it on, you can? So this means things like finding great study music that works for you, studying in intervals with regular breaks, which is the Pomodoro technique. These are vital if you want to spend less time writing your essays, but get higher marks. Now, if you struggle to get in the zone, check out my new Study With Me videos on YouTube. They're designed to help you get focused and then stay focused. So definitely check those out. So there we have it. What does this actually kind of, mean for you? Well, you don't need to have to write 40,000 words in a week to benefit from these strategies, right? You can learn from my mistakes, I guess, of leaving things so long and then having to do this, but then hopefully pick up some tips and advice that you can apply to your situation. So a reminder of these 7 things that I did is I decoded the guidance to understand the rules of the game. I created structure and templates for every section. I made sure I had a very, very detailed plan before I started writing. I did like a first pass before writing. I did the pre-work to get my material together. I gave myself permission to write messy and then edit later. I reduced cognitive load wherever possible, and I figured out how to get into the zone so that I was actually, as close to 100% of my energy and focus would be actually spent on moving that assignment forward. So if your essay writing experience, often or sometimes looks like staring at the screen, scanning through mountains of notes, not really sure what to say, writing, then deleting, and then writing, and then deleting, wondering why it takes you so long to write essays, looking at other people and being like, why are they able to write them faster than me? Feeling like you're just not good at writing, kind of almost being a bit defeatist and being like, well, essay writing is just not my thing, so it's always going to be a struggle. Or having that mad rush at the end where you end up submitting without the time or the energy to edit properly. If any of these ring true, then improving your essay writing skill and everything around it is going to change that. Because when you know what is expected of you, when you have a structure to follow, when you reduce distractions, you don't try to just hold everything in your head, when you've practiced enough to trust yourself to write messy first and tidy later, you will write faster, you will write better, and writing won't feel like a massive drain every single time. Now, I always kind of say that, a well-planned essay is going to make your tutor breathe a sigh of relief, man. They're going to settle into their chair with their cup of tea and get themselves primed to award you the high marks, because it's so obvious when an essay has good planning and structure to it. When it's focused, when it's easy to follow, you make their job so much easier. So if this episode has made you realize that writing faster, isn't about just typing quicker, it's about building better essay skills, then come join me for the Better Essays Bootcamp. So this is a brand new training of mine, and it's a 1-day small group training happening in August on Saturday the 16th, which is perfect timing to sharpen your writing skills during the summer break. So you're going to learn lots of new skills for essay writing, but you don't obviously have to be actively working on essays or have essay questions in mind, which is why I've designed this so that it's perfect for whatever kind of situation you're in, whether you're currently studying or waiting for your next module or academic year to start. Now, this bootcamp is for students who already know the basics of essay writing, but you want to go further. And we're going to focus on helping you add flow, depth, and distinction level writing to your essays. so that you can write clearer, stronger arguments, level up that critical thinking, learn to plan and edit with confidence, and stop second guessing whether you're doing it right. So in one day, just one day, you will go from decent writing to distinction level writing. You're going to learn how to refine your writing for critical depth, for precision, for polish, and you get personalized feedback from me on exactly what you need to improve. So when you join the bootcamp, you will get full access to the new version of my self-study program, Write Better Essays. This has video lessons, tools, examples, everything you need to write better essays all year round. So I'm working on the new version now. So when you sign up and save your spot, you will get access to that when it's ready, and then also access to this one-day bootcamp. Now, the spaces are capped at 20 students. So if you want to write faster, write smarter, and get the marks that you really want, then I will pop the link in the episode description. There are payment plans available, and you'll also be able to either enroll and save your spot immediately, or book in a call with me to chat through your studying situation and ask any questions about the bootcamp. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. It felt kind of nice to actually talk a bit more about the wild experience that I went through finishing that qualification. And yeah, it was kind of a shock to the system that I was able to write that much in that short amount of time. But then actually, after when I'd recovered and I reflected on it, I realized that of course I could write that because I have spent a long time working on these skills. And so there's no reason why you need to write 40,000 words in 7 days, but wouldn't it be incredible if you could write a few thousand words or whatever size assignments you have to write a lot quicker in a more streamlined way that doesn't cause you stress, that just feels easier. And then the output, the thing that pops out the end of it, is actually a better essay. Okay, so I will pop lots of links in the episode description, some of the other episodes I talked about, some of my free resources, and my Better Essays Bootcamp. Thank you so much for listening or watching, and I will see you in the next episode.